Veterans, did you know that your MOS is critical to your rating? It could be the last thing standing between you and a denied claim. Now, whether you called it a rate, an AFSC, an MOS, or just a job, what most veterans don't know is the massive part that it can play in your VA claims. As a veteran, your MOS, rate, AFSC, job, whatever you want to call it, it wasn't just a job. That was your entire existence while you were active duty. It literally was your life. So why is it that veterans don't mention it when they're filing their claims? They think the DD-214 stating their MOS in one spot is enough, but truth be told, it isn't. In this video, I'm going to show you how to leverage your MOS to ensure that you get the rating you deserve. I'm going to debunk some massive misconceptions, and I'm probably going to talk a little bit of shit. Let's go. Alright veterans, in order to get started, we need to have an accurate view of our battlefield, right? So, the claim war is fought on the VA's turf, and the process is all within their control, right? So the only thing that we can control is what we put forward, both in our claims and in our exams. Now, it sounds fair to think that these VA personnel are probably veterans themselves, and they probably know what these MOSs or rates or AFSCs mean and translate to as far as a daily existence or daily duties go, right? But that couldn't be further from the truth. The majority of these raters are not veterans themselves, and even if they are, they have no idea what your particular MOS did. So unfortunately, that couldn't be further from the truth. The majority of these people making decisions have never served and have no idea what these duties consist of, much less how to frame the impact that they had on you. So in this battle, remember, we only control what we put forward, so we need to make it as good as possible. Let's talk about why your MOS matters. Your MOS matters because that lone identifier can be a singular cue to some presumptive claims, types of exposure, physical injury patterns, and even mental wounding patterns, right? This value only gets seen if you properly detail it, though. If you assume that the rater is going to know what a 92 Sierra is or a 42 Romeo, comment below by the way if you know what those are. If you assume what the rater knows what that MOS is or what your daily life consisted of, you get no points and it won't help your claim. In fact, it could even detract from it because they could just throw the document in a way and say, like, what the fuck is this? Throw it. That happens. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about a few examples. Then I'm going to show you some VA documents that include presumptive ratings you've never seen before. And then we're going to talk about how to actually apply this within your claim or appeal so that you get the rating that you deserve. Let's get started with our examples. Example 1 I've got pulled up here is a tanker, a 19 hotel. And yes, I'm picking all Army MOSs, Air Force, Navy. You guys get the point. Maintainers, commonality throughout all this. So don't hate me. I'm just going with what I know here. But a tanker, a 19 hotel, right? Now, if you tell the rater that, maybe they think you drove around in a tank with some nice air conditioning, you had a warm place to sleep, maybe all the good stuff. Maybe that's what they think. But the truth be told, they're not thinking about your ankles, knees, and hips because you're jumping on and off of like a 6 or 8 foot tank truck. And you're doing that how many times a day? There's no way that's healthy. Then we're going to talk about tinnitus and hearing loss, constant noise, blast exposure from the main guns, tendinosis, awkward positions, the heavy lifting, maintaining all the work you had to do in those awkward positions. If you were reloading, all these crazy things that can go into this and they were daily parts of your duties, that is massive amounts of wear and tear on your body. But then let's get into the common exposures that one could probably have if they were a 19 hotel. So prolonged noise and blast exposure is an exposure. Vibration exposure from operating the heavy tracked vehicle, diesel fumes from constantly being around those turbine engines, and constant hydraulic fluid exposure, which can lead to skin issues, respiratory issues, you name it, right? These can all be contributing factors, and that's like assuming you don't even have a deployment, right? These are all exposures that can be contributing to secondary claims and other issues down the road. Let's go to our second example. Combat engineers, 12 Bravos, right? The guys that carried very heavy shit on patrol so that we could blow up doors and shit. Gotta love them. Glad that wasn't me. But back, knees, and shoulders from heavy lifting, the bridge building, obstacle construction, right? Constant hand and wrist injuries from tool and equipment use and overuse. Nothing like laying concertina wire for 12 hours to get you all messed up. TBI and concussions from, of course, the breaching and blast charges that they're constantly training with and exposed to. Then let's go into the exposures. Once again, we have our explosive blast, our dust, debris, particulate inhalation, especially inhalation exposure from the chemicals within all those blast charges, right? Then we've got the loud machinery, power tools, and extreme temperature during field ops. Now, claiming extreme temperature could be an interesting one. Most of your combat arms MOSs could claim this if they had a cold weather injury or a heat stroke. One of the extremes. That's where that would play in. But then let's go to an aviation mechanic. What claims could an aviation mechanic have? They rode around on the comfy helicopters all day. Life must have been chill. Well, you would think that, but here at VetClaims.ai, we've seen plenty of maintainers and mechanics all across every different airframe that there is, and they all have a few things in common. The biggest one is typically tendinosis of one of the shoulders from all the overworking and all the hand turning of the bolts, because they can't use power tools on airframes. But let's go into this. What we have is neck, shoulders, and back strain from being in awkward positions, constantly kneeling on solid metal with no knee pads or protection right there. So that's going to lead to some issues down the road. Then you've got the overhead work. There could be a lot of neck issues that come into that, plus the helmet and the different interactions they're going to have on the helicopter. Hearing loss and tinnitus, of course, you're near loud-ass helicopters, and hand and finger injuries, right? Hopefully you don't lose a finger in a helicopter. That'd be a mess. But point being, constant high decibel, when we go to the exposures, right? Constant high decibel noise exposure there. JP8, jet fuels, you're going to be exposed to that JP8 fume all day, every day. And that in and of itself, there's studies that have shown many things that are linked to that, right? Then we're going to go into the hydraulic fluid and the solvent. There may even be AFFF exposure, right? The firefighting foam. These are all things where if you just said any one of those MOSs to the VA rate, you put, I was a tanker. You're assuming that they think about the main gun explosions. They're thinking about the constant wear and tear from reloading the main gun or from just maintaining the vehicle. You're assuming that they're thinking about you jumping on and off of this thing. But the combat engineer, do you think that the rater's going to know, oh, you know what? They probably practice breaching 2 times a month and they're exposed to 12 blasts each time and they did this for 5 years. I wonder how fucked their hearing is. No. My point in showing you these examples, right, is that you can't make that assumption. You need to understand that the rater knows nothing about what your daily duties consisted of, and we have to detail it for them. All right. Now, if you stuck around this long, we're going to give you something pretty exciting that you probably don't know about, and it's called the FAST letter, right? And it can be an incredible game changer for you depending where you're at with your claim and what your MOS was. But the VA has this thing called FAST letters. Now, FAST stands for Federal Automated System Tracking. What you care about is what's in them. One of the most important is the 2010 FAST letter that links certain MOSs and jobs to a high probability of noise exposure. So basically, the VA pre-acknowledges that if you worked in certain jobs like artillery, armor, infantry, aviation, etc., you were likely exposed to damaging levels of noise. But get this, every MOS is listed on there if they have that kind of exposure, and it's a long list. We're going to share that document with you. You can download it on our website for free, but we're also going to have a screenshot popped up here in a sec. This is huge, though, for tinnitus and hearing loss claims, because if your MOS is on that list, it can help you prove your case without needing extra documentation or in-service medical records. But I'm going to go beyond just telling you that, and I'm going to show you exactly where the VA policy states that. That puts the burden back on the VA to prove that you wouldn't have been exposed. How would you have been a tanker and not been exposed to that noise? It puts the burden of proof on the VA. They're not going to fight on that. So if you get ringing in the ears and your MOS fits on that list, you need to not sleep on this, and it's one of the strongest examples of how your MOS directly affects your claim. Now, veterans, what we've got here is the highlighted document from this FAST letter itself, but I want to read this to you. If there is no documented evidence of an in-service illness, injury, or event with which the claim conditions could be associated, the duty MOS noise exposure listing will be considered. Based on the veteran's records, each duty MOS, Air Force Specialty Code, rating, or duty assignment documented will be reviewed for a determination as to the probability of exposure to hazardous noise on the duty MOS noise exposure listing. If the duty is shown to have a highly probable or moderate probability of exposure to hazardous noise, exposure to such noise will be conceded for the purposes of establishing the in-service event. So let's simplify that, veterans. What did that just say? Well, it just said that if there's no in-service medical records tracking an event or an injury or something that would have caused this hearing loss, the VA will concede the hearing loss, the noise exposure, they'll concede that as the in-service event if your MOS is on that list. It doesn't get much simpler than that. That's as clean cut as it can possibly be. All right, so now let's recap what we've learned and then let's talk about the application of this, all right? So to recap, 1, your MOS matters, right? It provides context and backing into your claims. 2, the VA rater doesn't know this unless you detail it. 3, this matters so much that even with no in-service medical records, your MOS can be on a list and it can get you qualified as for an in-service event, a presumptive condition essentially, right? 4, the VA won't cross-reference that FAST list unless you tell them that your MOS is on it. How do we know this? We've tested it. Now, should they cross-reference it every time? Yes. Do they? Absolutely not. That being said, those are the 4 key takeaways you should have so far in your head. And now I think we're ready to talk about how we apply this in your claim or appeal to ensure you get the rating you deserve. The strongest place to apply this knowledge is going to be in a evidence-based nexus or a statement in support of your claim. Now, I don't want you to overthink this, right? You can go to VetClaims.ai. This is what we do. This is why we win. This is why we're the fastest growing claim company in America. That being said, if you're doing this on your own, a simple doc with your name and information up at the top in the header, you don't have to overformat. You don't have to go crazy. Don't overthink it. Simple doc. your information up in the header, that formatting will do. Now, as for the content of a statement in support of the claim or content of a SISOC, I'm just going to call it a SISOC from here on out, it needs to cover a lot of things, right? The SISOC is a big document, and it's one of the things that veterans mess up the most. A strong SISOC can make the world of difference for your claim. That being said, we'll go over what needs to be in the perfect SISOC in another video that's going to be coming out soon. But for today, what we're going to be focused on is how you document your MOS as a part of this, right? It's one of the key components. You want to ensure that the VA rater understands your MOS, and how are we going to do that within the SISOC? Well, we're going to detail what our daily duty was like. What did you do? Did you hop on and off tanks that were 8 foot tall 20 times a day? Did you refuel helicopters? Did you fire artillery? Did you breach doors? What was your daily duty like? How often did you train with explosives? How often were you exposed to these things, right? You have to explain that to them, and you need to do it succinctly, right? You don't want to write them a novel, but you need them to understand this is what my life was like for this period of time, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it was, right? And as those duties changed, document that as well. There's no limit to this. Now, you don't want to write a book, like I said, but be thorough. We want to talk about when these injuries started to occur. Did the duties that you had every day exacerbate them? Did they continue to get worse? And then you want to talk about, did the unit culture prevent you from going to sick call? Because guess what? The VA knows that, but they're not going to assume it. The VA is very, very aware that in a lot of units in the military, you will get the shit hazed out of you if you go to sick call. It's well known, but they're not going to assume it. So once again, I'm bringing to your attention that you need to document, yeah, you know what? I sprained my ankle, but if I would have went to sick call, the guy might as well ended it right then and there, right? You got to document that. They're not going to assume it. Same with everything else. Let's continue in this and just say that ultimately you need to list the details of your daily duties, your deployed duties, and what your MOS entailed. You need to draw the connections between what those duties were that your MOS entailed and the claims that you're making, right? If you draw those lines, if you connect the dots for the rater, you will win the day. Now, as always, I want you to know that you can get the rating you deserve without the stress, without the concern by going to VetClaims.ai, link below. If you want to learn more about the battlefield for VA claims, watch this video that we just made last week. It's going off. And ultimately, if you want to look at the fast letter that we talked about here, that's going to be linked below too. You can download it for free on our website. Thank you so much for supporting VetClaims.ai. And until next time,